Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we have a massive stack of historical texts, behavioral studies, and veterinary science focused on one very specific, very goofy animal,
Yes, the boxer.
the boxer. But to really understand this dog, I actually want you to picture Munich in the late 1800s.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, we are talking like cobblestone streets slick with rain, the metallic smell of sawdust and blood drifting out of the butcher quarters.
Oh, wow. It's a remarkably intense, almost cinematic image to start with, especially when we're supposedly looking at, the playful family pets sitting in our living rooms today.
It is a huge leap. I mean, I get that, but stick with me here. Somewhere in that world, which is like equal parts slaughterhouse, hunting ground, and military training yard, there's a highly specialized type of dog.
Right.
It has this massive broad head, a uniquely powerful jaw, and a body built like it was designed by a structural engineer who, honestly, only cared about pure torque. And this dog has exactly one job.
Just one.
Yeah, and hold on. It isn't there to attack, and it isn't there to maul. It is there to hold.
Which is a huge distinction.
Totally. A wild boar charges, and this dog has to grab it by the ear or the throat and physically pin that massive thrashing animal in place until the human hunters arrive.
Which is terrifying when you really think about the physics of that encounter. I mean, a wild boar is essentially a low-to-the-ground muscle car with tusks.
That's a terrifying mental image.
Right. To stop it, you are looking at a machine built entirely for high-stakes life-or-death confrontation.
It really is, like dangerous work in canine form.
Yeah.
But here is the massive twist, and the whole reason we were doing this deep dive today. That exact same bloodline, that boar pinning canine machine, it gets refined and reshaped over the next few decades.
Yeah, quite drastically.
And it becomes the direct ancestor of the goofy, deeply affectionate, kid-adoring boxer that is probably sleeping completely upside down on someone's couch right now.
Snoring loudly, probably.
Oh, for sure. So our mission for this deep dive is to prove to you that absolutely nothing about how a modern boxer behaves is random. By unpacking this intense history, we are going to decode the why behind the boxer's quirks, their clinginess, and their physical design. Okay, let's unpack this. How do we actually bridge that massive gap?
Well, to understand the modern dog in your living room, we have to examine its original blueprint.
Right.
We have to look closely at the working-class tool it evolved from. You mentioned that boar hunting dog in the 1800s. That dog was known as the Bullenbeisser.
Which translates literally to bullbiter.
Precisely,
Yeah.
yeah. Depending on the region and the era, Germany had this long-standing tradition of using these incredibly powerful, big-headed dogs for bull baiting and boar hunting.
Just massive, tough dogs.
Exactly. The goal was controlling large, highly dangerous animals either for sport, for population control, or for the actual hunt. And the Bullenbeisser wasn't some flashy aristocratic companion that you paraded around to show off your wealth.
It wasn't a status symbol.
No, not at all. It was a brave, incredibly effective tool.
Let's talk about the temperament required for that, because to grab and hold a charging boar, you can't just be physically strong.
Muscle isn't enough.
Exactly. Muscle isn't enough. You have to be completely fearless. You have to commit fully to this incredibly dangerous situation without a single second of hesitation. But, and this is the part I find wild, you also have to trust the human standing behind you enough to let go of that boar the absolute instant they command you to.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how incredibly rare it was in the 1800s to deliberately breed for that specific psychological combination.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You had plenty of brave dogs and you had plenty of obedient dogs, but selecting for survival-level bravery paired with an intense, unbreakable partnership with a human, that was unique.
They needed both.
Exactly. Nobody wanted a dog that panicked and ran away, but they also didn't want a dog that just acted on its own aggressive agenda and ignored the hunter.
It makes me think of a highly specialized piece of heavy industrial machinery. The Bullenbeisser was essentially a biological vice grip.
A biological vice grip. I like that.
Right. It was built with enough crushing power to stop a monster, but that power only functioned properly because a human handler was there pulling the lever. The machine had to defer to the operator, even when its own adrenaline was totally maxed out and it was in the middle of a fight.
That is a perfect analogy. The dog was the vice grip, but the human was the off switch.
The off switch, wow.
And that level of deeply ingrained deference to the human operator, that constant psychological check-in to ask, what do we do next? That is the foundational code of the breed.
But then the world changes. We hit the 1890s, and Germany is industrializing rapidly.
Look at cities are expanding.
The old hunting estates are shrinking, and suddenly, a biological vice grip for wild boars is essentially obsolete machinery.
The demand for boar catchers just vanishes overnight. So the breeders in Munich are faced with a stark choice. They either let this unique bloodline die out completely, or they have to entirely repurpose that incredible engine they've built.
And obviously, they chose to repurpose it.
They did.
Enthusiasts in Munich started refining the Bullenbeisser. Historical records show they wanted to soften that raw, hunting-level aggression. But they desperately wanted to keep the athleticism, the sharp intelligence, and that fearless devotion to the handler.
They formed a breed club around 1895 and started creating a formal written standard. And look at how quickly the dog's rules shifted once they started selecting for a more balanced temperament.
It was fast, wasn't it?
Incredibly fast. Within just a few decades, this former boar hunter is working as a police dog, serving in World War I and World War II as a messenger and guard dog, and most importantly, transitioning smoothly into homes as a family companion.
It's an incredible rebrand.
Yeah.
But speaking of the transition, so they've repurposed this aggressive hunting machine into a companion and police dog. But Bullenbeisser Bullbiter is terrible PR for a family pet.
Yeah, terrible.
They needed a new name, which brings up the mystery of where the name boxer actually came from. Because the historical data gives us three completely different theories.
Yes, and it's a question owners ask constantly.
So what's the first one?
The first theory is that it evolved from Bierboxer, which was just a colloquial nickname sometimes attached to these Bullenbeisser-type dogs hanging around German beer gardens.
Okay, a working-class beer garden dog. I can see that.
Right. Then the second theory is linguistic. It suggests it's just a German mispronunciation of an old English hunting term.
Interesting.
But it's the third theory that the experts, the cynologists, the researchers who study canine history and behavior actually lean toward.
Okay.
And that theory is that the name comes from the dog's literal tendency to stand up on its hind legs and spar with its front paws during play.
Now, I have to push back on this a little bit. Is this just human projection?
How do you mean?
Like, are we just looking at a dog jumping up on his back legs and deciding, oh, look, he's throwing a left hook, just because it makes for a cute origin story?
It's a very fair question, but no, it's not just projection. This punch-throwing behavior is a highly distinctive, heavily documented reality of the breed today.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Cynologists accept this theory because the physical motion is so remarkably consistent across the breed. Unlike other dogs that might just jump up to grab a toy, boxers truly do bat, swat, and strike with their front paws in a downward sweeping motion that distinctly mimics boxing.
That is wild. The dog literally named itself through its own body language.
Pretty much.
And that physical expressiveness brings us right into the psychology of the boxer today, because that historical reprogramming from the 1890s directly explains the unique psychology and the intense attachment issues that owners see in their homes right now.
Yes, the infamous Velcro dog.
If you've ever owned a boxer, you know exactly what we're talking about. They don't just hang out in the same house as you.
No, they do not.
They follow you from room to room. If you sit down, they insist on leaning their entire body weight against your legs. They are incredibly clingy, and looking at the behavioral data explains exactly why.
It goes back to the history.
Right. Remember that biological vice grip? A dog bred to release a boar mid-fight had to be deeply, intensely attuned to human body language. It had to constantly look back and do emotional check-ins with its handler to know what to do next.
That closeness is a factory setting. It is not a flaw or a sign of insecurity.
It's just how they're built.
Exactly. Generation after generation, these dogs were selected precisely because they prioritized the human relationship above their own survival instincts. You don't just erase that level of psychological dependency. The behavior didn't disappear just because the boars disappeared.
It just got redirected to you, making dinner in your kitchen.
Yes!
They're checking in with you the same way their ancestors checked in on the hunting grounds.
Which naturally leads us to the other major psychological trait of the boxer. Their reputation as the eternal puppy.
Oh, the energy.
The endless energy. Boxers are famous for maintaining this playful, highly emotionally expressive behavior well into their second or third year of life, long after other breeds have mellowed out and matured.
But wait, a prolonged puppyhood doesn't exactly sound like an advantage when you're fighting a wild animal. Why would that survive the breeding process?
This brings us to a crucial biological concept called neoteny.
Neoteny.
Yeah. Neoteny is the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. When human beings selectively breed animals for highly cooperative, human-focused, emotionally expressive temperaments, when we select for tameness and partnership, a frequent neurological byproduct is that the animal retains juvenile behaviors.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because the boxer was bred for such close interactive partnership rather than independent solitary work like a livestock guardian, their brains inherently kept that juvenile desire for play and constant interaction.
So when your 3-year-old boxer is doing chaotic zoomies around the coffee table or throwing its toys in the air, they aren't broken or immature. That is the neoteny at work.
Exactly. The genetic pathways that make them look to you for guidance are the exact same pathways that keep them acting like puppies. But that prolonged adolescence often leads to a major misunderstanding when it comes to training. People often label boxers as stubborn.
Wait, that feels counterintuitive. If they are so hyper-attuned to humans and they constantly want to check in with us, why do they have this massive reputation for being stubborn and just ignoring commands?
Because people confuse a lack of impulse control with defiance. Behavioral studies clarify this beautifully. Boxers are incredibly intelligent, but their impulse control lags far behind their intellect during those early years.
Oh, so they know what to do. They just can't help themselves.
Right. They actually care more about emotional engagement with you than they do about rote obedience commands. If a repetitive drill gets boring, they will try to turn it into a game because they crave the emotional reaction.
It sounds like training a boxer isn't like dealing with a defiant teenager who is intentionally breaking the rules to challenge your authority.
Not at all.
It's more like trying to teach a brilliant but overly enthusiastic student who just wants to make you laugh. Like, they absolutely know the answer to the math problem, but they'd rather draw a funny picture on the chalkboard just to get a reaction out of you.
That's a great way to reframe it. They aren't defying you, they are overwhelmed by enthusiasm and simply haven't built the neurological self-control to filter it yet.
This intense emotional connection and this delayed maturity make them sound incredibly fun. But how does that history of violence translate when the stakes are high? Say, with vulnerable children in the house, or when a stranger suddenly knocks on the door.
This is where the boxer's behavioral discrimination really shines. Historically, they are famously known as excellent nanny dogs.
Which sounds completely contradictory to the boar hunting origins.
It does, until you realize that the exact same behavioral discrimination that allowed a Bullenbeisser to attack a boar with lethal force, but then completely release and calm down the second its handler commanded it to, is what allows a modern boxer to read context in your living room.
Wow.
They have an incredible ability to adjust their intensity based on the fragility of what's in front of them. That's why this muscular powerhouse of a dog can be incredibly gentle with a toddler.
Though, as veterinary consensus always points out, supervision with children and any dog is strictly required.
Always. You never leave a dog and a child unsupervised. But their ability to read the vulnerability of a child is a direct descendant of their working intelligence. They know the difference between a threat and a fragile member of their pack.
What about when they aren't being gentle? What about the guard dog stereotype?
We need to dispel the myth of the aggressive guard dog right now. Boxers are naturally watchful. They will absolutely position themselves between their family and a perceived threat. But naturally protective does not mean naturally aggressive.
Those are two very different things.
Very different. If we connect this to the bigger picture, a socially healthy boxer is confident and friendly. Conflating controlled confidence with hostility does a massive disservice to this deeply social breed.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So, when people see a boxer standing guard, planting its feet, and intensely watching a stranger at the door, they're completely misreading the dog's internal software. They're assuming the dog wants to fight, when really it's just doing a risk assessment.
Exactly. It is calculating, not raging. And here's the fascinating mechanism behind how they do that risk assessment. Because the boxer is a Velcro dog. Its guard dog behavior is actually just mirroring the owner's nervous system. They aren't guarding the house. They are reading your heart rate and your body language.
Wait, so they're using me as the barometer for the threat?
Precisely. If you answer the door and you are relaxed, the boxer immediately clocks your lowered heart rate, sees your relaxed shoulders, and accepts the stranger. It uses that situational awareness to say, okay, the handler says we are safe.
That's amazing.
But if you tense up, if your heart rate spikes because someone sketchy is at the door, they become a wall. They're literally an extension of your own anxiety. Once you signal that the stranger is a friend, a well-socialized boxer completely drops the guard act and usually tries to lean its entire body weight on the new person.
That is incredible. They are basically an emotional mirror,
Mm.
which naturally dictates the reality of actually living with one of these dogs day to day.
Mm.
Because they possess this high intelligence, this emotional mirroring, and this intense athletic capability, managing a boxer requires a very specific lifestyle commitment. You can't just passively own a boxer.
No, you cannot. Let's look at their physical needs. We are talking about 60 to 90 minutes of real, heart-pumping daily activity.
And crucially, behavioral studies emphasize that physical exhaustion alone is not enough. You can run them until their legs are completely tired, but without mental stimulation, things like puzzle feeding, training games, or scent work, you just end up with a physically tired but mentally restless, highly destructive dog.
Yes.
A bored boxer will remodel your living room, and not in a good way.
Which tells us exactly who should actually own this breed. They thrive with active families, people with flexible or work-from-home schedules, and owners who are completely prepared for that long adolescent phase we discussed. They are not for hands-off owners, and they can be overwhelming for unprepared first-timers.
Wait, I want to push back on a common assumption here about dog ownership in physical space. You're saying a highly committed owner who lives in a small apartment is actually a better scenario for this dog than, like, a lazy owner who just leaves the dog alone in a giant fenced-in backyard.
100%. Space matters far less than engagement. An apartment boxer who gets 90 minutes of interactive running, obedience training, and puzzle games with their owner every single day is going to be infinitely better adjusted than a boxer who has 2 acres of grass but never interacts with a human.
Because they need that partnership.
Exactly. The backyard dog is going to invent its own jobs, like barking at the fence or digging up your landscaping, because the connection is missing.
It really is all about that connection. And you could see that working history stamped right onto their physical blueprint, too. Let's talk about the mechanics of their body. The broad, slightly undershot jaw. That evolved specifically to maximize grip strength. It allowed them to clamp down on an animal while still being able to breathe through their nose.
Or follows function.
Right. And the square, highly muscular body. That isn't just for looks. That compact center of gravity gives them the explosive power and agility needed to dodge tusks. A dog with a long back would snap its spine trying to pivot that fast, but a square dog can twist instantly. Even the short coat was practical. It kept the dog cool during intense physical work.
But building an animal for that kind of explosive power carries a heavy biological tax. That specific physical design introduced specific anatomical vulnerabilities that require active management from the owner.
Right. Let's get into the health side, because we should definitely talk about the brachycephalic issue. Boxers have a shortened muzzle. It's not as extreme as some breeds, like a pug, but it does cause serious heat sensitivity and airway efficiency concerns.
Think of it like trying to cool down a massive high-performance sports car engine, but you've deliberately shrunk the size of the radiator grill. That shortened muzzle means they physically cannot pull in enough air to cool their blood down on a hot day. You absolutely cannot run them hard in the middle of a hot summer afternoon.
And beyond the muzzle, there are specific genetic risks that veterinary science highlights. Because they were bred for such explosive, fast-twitch muscle power, their hearts have to work incredibly hard to pump blood during those bursts of activity. Over generations, this heavy biological tax resulted in a genetic predisposition for heart conditions,
Yes.
specifically arrhythmias, like ARVC, which is actually known as boxer cardiomyopathy. It's essentially a condition where the electrical system of that massive heart misfires.
They also see hip and cruciate ligament issues because of that athletic, heavy build torquing on their joints, and they do carry a higher lifetime risk for certain cancers, particularly mast cell tumors and lymphoma.
So what does this all mean? Because listening to that list of conditions sounds terrifying for someone considering the breed. How does a new owner separate healthy awareness from constant panic?
This raises an important question about modern pet ownership. The key is understanding that genetic risk is not inevitability. You separate awareness from panic by being fiercely proactive.
Proactive, yeah.
This means prioritizing preventive veterinary care, getting regular, thorough checkups, and doing specific cardiac screenings like Holter monitors if your vet recommends them.
And there are great tools for this now.
Yeah.
Veterinary networks often recommend using tools like VitalPet, which can help owners proactively track vaccines, weight changes, and appointment history right alongside their vet. It's about having the data in your pocket so you aren't guessing about their baseline health.
Precisely. You become an active partner in your dog's healthcare. You monitor their baseline so you notice the small changes early. And of course, the golden rule remains always consult a vet directly for any actual health concerns.
Always. So, to bring this deep dive full circle, whenever you look at a boxer and wonder why it behaves the way it does, the answer always starts more than a century ago in Munich. The history is the literal blueprint for everything.
Wow.
The insane courage, the Velcro attachment leaning against your leg, the emotional mirroring of your own anxiety, and even the goofy punch-throwing theatricality is all inherited code.
It is a masterpiece of purposeful breeding that just happened to transition perfectly into modern companionship.
But knowing this historical blueprint is really only half the battle. The next step in fully understanding this dog is looking at the critical socialization windows and early training foundations. That puppy and growth phase is where this incredible raw potential is either carefully nurtured into a brilliant companion or sadly mishandled by someone who doesn't understand the machinery.
The blueprint is what they are born with. The socialization is what they become.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to mull over. Look at the pets in your own life today. Consider how many of the weird quirks or funny habits that you laugh at might actually be ancient engineered survival skills just looking for a modern outlet. When your dog insists on sitting on your feet or pacing nervously by the front window, what phantom wild boar is your dog trying to catch in your living room?